Welcome back to Rising. Niall, what is in your notes today?
Well, today, Robbie, back to a topic we were discussing yesterday, where there are finally signs that the political world is shifting on Gaza. But it's taken so much suffering to get here. The death toll among Palestinians this week passed 60,000 people. Huge swathes of Gaza have been levelled. Children are dying from hunger. At least 16 kids under the age of 5 in just the past few weeks, according to the United Nations. Earlier this week, I spoke with Maram Humaid, a journalist living, working and raising her 2 young children in Gaza. Here's what she had to say.
Even the starvation, it enters now the 5th month without any solution, and people now are dying, are literally dying. And I myself, I'm sharing my message as someone who's afraid of reaching this point, just to face death because of the starvation. I'm in line of those who are waiting, and I'm totally just concerns and just depressed because I reached this point that I'm afraid for my kids and for my life to face death because of starvation. So no one is listening.
The deafness of governments to the plight of the Palestinians is beginning to change, even if it should never have existed in the first place. France recently became the first major European power to say it will recognise the state of Palestine. Britain followed suit with some caveats, and so too, just yesterday, did Canada. Here in the US, the solid support Israel has traditionally enjoyed on the right has begun to fray. In the past few days, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene became the first notable Republican to call what Israel is doing in Gaza a genocide. And even President Trump has distanced himself a little bit from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Good for him. More of that, please. Among Democratic senators, support for blocking US arms sales to Israel reached a new high just last night. A measure from Bernie Sanders drew 27 votes. That's not remotely enough to pass, but it's almost twice as many as had backed a similar resolution before. Meanwhile, social media clips from Gazans themselves have shown the pain and destruction they're experiencing to the world. And back here, primarily online commentators, some from the right and centre, Tucker Carlson to Piers Morgan, Theo Vaughan to Joe Rogan, have expressed abhorrence at what we're seeing. Here's Vaughan in a clip that went viral a couple of months back.
For me, it's just like how I feel like you see all these photos of people, just children, women, people, body parts, just people like putting their kids back together. And I just can't believe that we're watching that and that more isn't said about it.
But in the mainstream media, meanwhile, there's often, in my view, too much credulity about Israeli claims, too much willingness to take talking points at face value, even when they contradict the evidence of our own eyes. Some claim that the United Nations is to blame for not distributing aid, or that Hamas is stealing that aid. The New York Times, to its credit, finally reported just a few days ago that even the Israeli military had, quote, never found proof that Hamas has, quote, systematically stolen food from the United Nations. And I can't improve on a recent headline from the liberal Israeli news organisation Haaretz. Israel caused the hunger crisis in Gaza, no matter how much it tries to blame the UN. Too often, though, we've seen a tendency in mainstream American coverage that has always frustrated me. It's the pattern of casting other nations simply as friends or foes of the US and then tweaking the media lens accordingly. At its worst, that can lead to an absurd credulousness regarding Washington's supposed friends. If you don't believe me, indulge me with a thought experiment. Let's imagine that Vladimir Putin takes a parcel of the land his forces occupy in eastern Ukraine and seals it off completely. Let's imagine this parcel of land has had its own agriculture bombed to oblivion, and no food or other aid enters for more than 2 months. Let's imagine then, as global outrage builds about this growing hunger, that Mr. Putin permits a trickle of aid to be distributed only at sites controlled by the Russian military, and when starving Ukrainians arrive there, they are shot dead in the hundreds. Let's imagine, as a backdrop to this, that Mr. Putin's finance minister, his national security minister, his previous defence minister and his current defence minister had all publicly and explicitly advocated for siege tactics. Let's imagine a member of parliament in Mr. Putin's party has gone on TV and said directly he wants to starve the people who live in this place. Let's imagine more than 100 aid groups sign a letter that say it's the Russian government siege that's causing the starvation. Let's imagine we've seen in front of our own eyes the victims of that starvation in desperate straits, their bodies emaciated, their eyes empty. And then let's imagine Mr. Putin comes out and says there's no starvation in eastern Ukraine. He would, of course, rightly be castigated, cast out, and derided. Benjamin Netanyahu has done exactly this against exactly the same context, and he deserves exactly the same disdain from our media and from our politicians. Things are changing on Gaza. It's too late for many. But now we need to do more and do it faster and see the truth in front of our own faces.
I mean, we don't have to imagine that example of
Right.
deliberate starvation of Ukrainian people was a Soviet policy half a century ago. Yeah, you know, I agree. I think what is happening in Gaza is terrible. It can't be stomached. I think it's a difficult political situation to resolve because Hamas is a terrorist organization that has attacked Israel. I have always supported a two-state solution. I have. However, practically, I don't think a state can just be allowed to come into being if it's going to be run by a group that is dedicated to Israel's destruction. So so it's a complicated situation to resolve, but the starving is not it's not morally complicated at all. It can't be allowed to go on. This is not about, you know, making the American taxpayers pay for starving people elsewhere. Obviously, I don't think there's any obligation to help people, but there certainly is a generosity and a willingness to do so that is being thwarted by Israel controlling the area. And they control it so totally that on some level now, you know, if the enemy force is not, I know it's not totally defeated, but they've killed tons of Hamas people. It doesn't have a functioning other entity in charge of it right now. At some level, you are now morally obligated to attend to not that I really want like an Israeli occupation or something, but they should supply food to the people there, given that they control all the entryway access points.
Well, and also, I mean, on the point of what American obligations are, you and I have talked numerous times about the enormous amounts of military aid that are given by the US to Israel.
Yeah.
Now, that supplies very blatantly obvious leverage that neither Biden nor Trump have particularly used. Biden paused one arms shipment. And, you know, you and I talked all those months ago about the fact that the blockade of aid at that time was so severe that we built that ludicrous floating pier at the cost of many millions of dollars, which
broke off immediately.
Which then broke apart and floated away somewhere, and was like, oh, let's not do that. So, I mean, by simply applying the most basic of American pressure, you could alleviate some of this catastrophic human suffering. And, you know, I do think that the two-state solution ultimately is the best solution. It will take a long time to get from here to there, but, you know, people are being starved to death by a government that is a recipient of massive American aid.
And you're right that the domestic politics with respect to Israel is really changing. Obviously, the left is very upset, has been historically. Mainstream Democrats are becoming more resistant to Israel. And then on the right, this is becoming like, this is not a 50-50 issue. This is becoming a 70-30 or an 80-20 issue where the online younger right people are. It's a no-brainer that they don't want to continue supporting Israel.
Absolutely.
Up next, a GOP leader says that the Democratic Party is leaderless after watching Cory Booker's outburst on the Senate floor. We'll tell you more. Stay with us.